everyone! In today's video, I'm going to show you step by step how to wrap a present like a pro so it makes for a beautiful gift-giving experience. And fun fact, my very first job was as a gift wrapper for the holidays at the mall. So I've got a little bit of experience with this. But before we get into the video, for those of you that are new to my channel, hi, my name is Catherine, and I love to make videos on decorating for the holidays. And I consider presents part of my decorations. I also sometimes make videos on fashion and beauty. So if you like any or all of those topics, then I hope you'll consider subscribing. Also, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, especially if you find it helpful or enjoy it. That tells YouTube that they should help other people discover the video as well. And since I told you my very first job, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you. Leave me a comment down below and let me know what your very first job was. Now let's get started with the supplies that we'll need. The first supply is an obvious one, and that's going to be the present. But my preference is to have the present actually in a gift box because it allows for crisper edges when wrapping. You can use shipping boxes or other types of cardboard boxes, but the problem with that is a lot of times they're a little misshapen and the edges are a little bit softer or rounder, so it makes it hard to get a good crisp edge on your wrapping. The next supply is your wrapping paper, and there's a few things that I like to look for in my wrapping paper. First of all, I like it to be a medium weight. Too thin and it tears easily and it's just too flimsy, but too thick and it's hard to get it to tape down and stay down. Also, through the years, I've just learned that I like to avoid things like flocking or thick patches of glitter because once again, it can be hard to fold that and get it to tape down and stay down. Another preference is to find wrapping paper that has grid lines on the back side. That helps you cut the wrapping paper straight and line up the present within the paper evenly. I have a tendency to change my wrapping paper theme each year, and so I like to find a theme that works with one of my trees. This was a cool set that I found. All four of these papers came together. The next supply is going to be how we cut the paper, so scissors. And I like to have a dedicated pair of scissors expressly for wrapping to make sure that the blade stays sharp and doesn't get any nicks in it. So avoid pulling out the kitchen scissors that you've been using for who knows what. Another optional supply is a paper cutter. These are great because it allows you to zip along a straight edge of the paper really quickly and smoothly. Then for tape, I like to use two different types of tape. The first tape is just your regular one-sided tape, and I'm going to use this to tape down any paper that's going to get covered up with another piece of paper and therefore you don't end up seeing that tape. Then I like to use double-sided tape for any of the edges that I'm going to tape down that won't get covered up, so that way, once again, you don't see the tape, it's underneath the paper. And then the last thing you need is whatever kind of ribbon, bows, etc. that you're going to use to actually decorate the present. I'm not actually the biggest fan of using pre-made bows, preferring instead to use ribbon to make my own bows. Pro tip, when you're purchasing ribbon for your Christmas tree, purchase an extra roll or two that you can use around your presents that you're going to put under that tree. And then you can also use things like small ornaments, picks, stems, greenery, other things that might embellish the present and make it look a little more special. And once again, you can get items that might help tie with the theme of the tree. And to make sure everything's handy when I'm ready to wrap, I do like to keep a kit of my wrapping supplies, so I know that my scissors, tape, everything I need are going to be exactly where I look for them. Now I'll pan down and we'll get started wrapping the gift step by step. The first step is to measure out and cut the wrapping paper into the size that you need for the gift. And my preference is to be able to take the paper width-wise and be able to wrap it all the way around the gift to cut down on the amount of waste that I have from the wrapping paper. A quick way to determine how much wrapping paper you need is to take your wrapping paper and roll it out, and then take your present and put it at the end of the wrapping paper, and we're going to count sides and see if we can get all four sides plus a little bit for overlap all in the width of this paper. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then I have just a little bit of width over here still left that will allow me to comfortably cover one end with the next. So then what I'm going to do is I've flipped the paper around the opposite direction, and I'm going to determine where I need to cut off at since I can use the width of the paper. So once again, I'm going to pull the paper up to one edge and then run it all the way under the paper, and then I'm going to look for a grid line past that and I'm going to cut along one of those grid lines. I don't want to cut too far past because then I have extra paper on the ends that I have to deal with, and it just uses up paper that I don't need. So this is a great time to use the paper cutters. So I'm going to find that grid line, then just zip along. Next, we're going to tape the paper around the box. And so to do this, I want to get my present pretty squarely in the center of the paper. And this is where it's really nice to have those grid lines. So from side to side, it looks like I've got about 3 grids on each side. And then I can just kind of eyeball doing it lengthwise. All right, so we'll scoot that in just a little bit. And here's where it's really important that you have the paper centered, especially because this one has a pattern. So you'll see that when I pull this up and then I pull around the other side, I want that seam to match up fairly close for this to look like a professional job. And it looks like it does, so I think I have that pretty well centered. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to tape the first side down just with my regular single-sided tape because this is going to get covered up. So in order to tape it down, I want to press the present down kind of on the paper firmly so I can pull this side of the paper a little bit just to make sure this is tight. And I like to run my fingers along the edge just to make sure I'm getting a good crisp line. And then I'm going to tape it down. And typically for this part, I use just one piece of tape in the middle unless it's something that's really long. Then I'm going to take the other side and once again pull that tight. And this is where my seams should meet up pretty well, which they do. Once again, just run my fingers along the edge, making sure I'm getting crisp lines and not getting any wrinkles or extra bubbles. So I've got that pulled. Now I'm going to take my double-sided tape and I'm going to place about 3 pieces here. So I'm going to come to the very outside edge in the middle and I'm going to put a piece of tape. And I'm just going to do a couple of smaller ones near the outside edges, getting as close to the ends of that wrapping paper as possible. Then once again, I'm going to pull this, starting in the middle, and just run my fingers pressing that down. You want to be careful not to pull too hard because you could rip the paper, but also you could create some weird buckling or things in the paper. So now we've got a smooth, nice job all the way around. The next thing we're going to do are the ends, and there's 2 different ways you can fold them in, and I like to use the size or shape of the box to help dictate which I use. So I'm going to show you the one that I would typically do for something that's more of a thinner rectangle like this first. So what we're going to do is we're going to basically fold in the short edges to create 2 flaps, top and bottom, and then fold those in on each other. So to do that, I'm going to start with the present with one of the biggest flat sides laying down. It doesn't matter right now whether it's top or bottom. And I'm going to take one side, I'm going to push that in, and then I'm going to run my finger so that I get a good flat seam right there. And then I'm going to fold that bottom piece of paper using the table to make sure I get a good straight line and that's as tight to the present as possible. Then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Now I'm going to flip the present and I'm going to do it again with the other flap. So now we've created 2 flaps. If you think it would help, you can add some single-sided tape to tape those inside bits down to the present. Sometimes that can just be helpful to make it look a little bit more clean. Now we're going to fold those 2 flaps one on top of the other, and it is important which side you start with. So what I have right here is the top of the present. I know that because this is the seam, and so the seam is on the bottom. So I want to take the flap connected to the seam and I want to fold that in first so the top one folds down towards the bottom. So for that, I'm going to start bottom side up, and I'm going to run my fingers along, creating a nice crease at the edge. And then I'm going to take my single-sided tape and I'm going to tape down to the box. One thing to look out for with this step is you want to make sure that both flaps don't extend further than the present itself. So if you need to, you may need to cut a little bit off if you didn't measure quite right. Now we're going to take the other flap and we're going to fold that and tape it this way. But this is where we're going to want to use double-sided tape. So I'm going to take 3 pieces of tape once again. I'm going to put one in the center of the flap at the edge, and then 2 smaller pieces at each of the outside flaps at the edges. And then I'm going to take that and I'm going to pull it up and press it down. Now, I didn't fold this exposed edge in. If you have a cut that's not either perfectly straight or the paper looks a little ragged at the edge or something, you could do that. I try to avoid doing that just because that's more bulk and doesn't make it lay quite as flat, but that's something else that you might keep in mind. Now we're going to do the other flap the second way. And this is actually the way that I prefer to do it when the box is more square, but I'm not gonna wrap a second present for this, so I can do it on this one, so I'm gonna show you here. And so that way is to take the paper from the bottom side and to fold it in first, and then we're gonna fold the shorter sides in and then the final flap. So it's gonna look very similar, I'm just doing them in a different order. So I'm running my fingers along to make sure that I've got this good and crisp. I'm gonna take single-sided tape, I'm gonna tape that down, then I'm going to flip the present up on its side so I can take that paper, pinch it down tight against the edge of the present, and create the fold there. Do the same thing on the other side. I tell you, doing this while trying to make sure you can see what I'm doing is really a testament to my wrapping. Now that I've created those two, I'm going to fold this one in, and what I'm doing is I'm kind of running my finger until I get to the bottom, the edge of the present, and I'm once again kind of running my nail to kind of create where that's at so I can then press that flap. Do the same thing on the other side. And see, now we've created that so we can fold that up. Now you'll notice that that's not looking quite as taut. That's because this really isn't a great way to do it for this type of present, but we'll make it work. So, okay, so we've got that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put some single-sided tape right here to pull this tight and get this as flat to the box as possible. And once again, we're using single-sided tape because we're gonna cover this up. And now we're just gonna double check, everything's looking good. I have a little bit of white showing there, so I'm just gonna fold that down and in so it doesn't show. But otherwise my line looks nice and crisp. So I'm gonna take my double-sided tape, and similarly, I'm gonna put one piece right at the edge in the center, and 2 small pieces on the sides. Then I'm going to, nice thing, when you're doing the last one, you can pull the present on its side, which sometimes makes it easier to do this step. Sorry, you can't see it quite as well though. And there's that end. It's not quite as good because, like I said, that's not the preferred way for this size box, but I mean, it still looks really nice. So now we've got the present wrapped, we're gonna move on to putting our ribbon on. So I think for this present, I'm going to use this pretty burlap plaid ribbon that I have that I think will coordinate nicely with the tree behind me. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to wrap the ribbon around all 4 sides and then just tie off a simple bow. And I think I'm probably going to add a couple of these sprigs, which I actually did use on the tree behind me, just so this really does coordinate with the tree. I do have a full video dedicated just to different ways you can embellish a wrapped present, and it includes different ways to create a bow. I'm going to keep this one pretty simple. If you want to get more into all of those different ways and get some ideas, I'll link that video down below. So to create a bow that runs around all four sides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my ribbon, I'm going to run it under the bottom. So I have the top of the present facing up. I'm going to run it under the bottom, make sure that it's centered, and I'm going to figure out how much tail I want to be able to create my simple bow and still have enough for the tail. So I think that's about the right length. So then I'm going to take the ribbon that I haven't cut yet, I'm going to pull that up and over, and then I'm going to have them cross and then go in 90-degree directions away from each other. The reason I'm doing it this way is I don't want this cross, which creates a lump, to be on the bottom of the present. This is on the top. That way the present sits flat to the ground. So now that I have that, I'm going to hold in the middle and I'm going to run the ribbon underneath and around so that it comes out on the other side. And see, we've got the nice flat piece on the bottom. Now I'm just going to tie these two ends together before I do my bow, because that just makes it a little bit easier for me. So I'm just creating a simple knot. All right, now that we have that, I'm going to create my bow. So that's what we're looking like. I'm going to cut off this end, and then I'm going to finish off both of the ends. Now I'm going to take my couple of stems. I'm going to figure out how I want them to go on the present. I think I want both of them to one side. I'm just going to kind of play around with that, get the placement right, and then I'm going to tape the stems up under the ribbon so you don't see the stems. For this, I can use my single-sided tape because the stems are up under here. I'm just going to lift up the ribbon, tape that down. So here's the finished present, and even though it's technically empty, I am going to go ahead and put it under the tree so I can enjoy it with the other presents that I wrap in the coordinated wrapping paper. And I'll go ahead and insert some video of how it all looks with the tree. So there's step by step how you can wrap your very own present like a pro. I hope you found this video helpful. If so, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. But do you have any other questions? If so, meet me down in the comments below and I'll be happy to answer them. And while you're there, don't forget to let me know, what was your very first job? Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great holiday season, and until next time, bye.